I, 26F, stood beside my new husband, Leo, 28M. The garden was filled with soft lights and the sound of happy chatter. Everything felt perfect. My father, Richard, stood up to give his toast. He held a glass of champagne and smiled at everyone. It was the same smile he used for business deals. It looked warm, but it never quite reached his eyes. Still, tonight, I let myself believe it was real. I wanted to believe it. For this one night, I wanted a normal, happy family. He looked from me to Leo, and his smile seemed to soften just a little. "To my daughter Clara," he began. His voice was smooth and confident. It was the voice that had built a small empire from nothing. "You are my greatest achievement. Watching you grow has been the greatest joy of my life." People smiled and nodded. My mother, Helen, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. I squeezed Leo's hand. He squeezed back, a silent sign of support. He knew my relationship with my father was complicated. He knew my father saw everything as a transaction, a win or a loss. And to Leo, my father continued, turning his gaze to my husband. "You are the man who has won her heart. That is no small feat." A few people chuckled. "Leo, you are a good man. I have seen the way you look at her. I have seen the way she looks at you. You make her happy. And for a father, that is all that truly matters in the world." My heart swelled. Maybe I had been wrong about him. Maybe this was a new beginning for all of us. Maybe he was finally ready to let me be my own person. He raised his glass higher. "So I ask you all to join me. Welcome to the family, Leo. May your life together be filled with love, happiness, and prosperity." The guests all raised their glasses. "To Clara and Leo," they echoed. Leo leaned over and kissed me. It was a quick, sweet kiss that tasted of champagne and hope. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but for the first time in a long time, it was a tear of pure joy. The applause was warm and genuine. My father walked over to us, his arms open. He hugged me first. "I am so proud of you," he whispered in my ear. It sounded so sincere. Then he turned to Leo and clapped him on the shoulder. "A word with you, son," he said, his voice low and friendly. "Just for a moment." Leo smiled and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Thompson," he said. My father corrected him. "Richard, please. We are family now." He led Leo away from the main party toward the quiet, dimly lit part of the garden near the old oak tree. I watched them go, feeling a sense of peace I had not felt in years. My mother came up and took my hand. "Wasn't that a lovely toast?" she asked. "Your father really does love you." I nodded, wanting to believe her. "Yes," I said. "It was perfect." I chatted with some cousins for a few minutes. I kept glancing over at the oak tree. My father was talking and Leo was listening. I could not see their expressions clearly in the dark. Then I saw my father hand Leo a large manila envelope. I thought it was a wedding gift, maybe a deed to a house or stock certificates. My father loved grand gestures. It was his way of showing affection, through money and power. I smiled to myself. Then I saw Leo's posture change. He stiffened. He took a step back. Two large men I did not recognize suddenly appeared from the shadows. They stood on either side of Leo. They were dressed in dark suits like security guards. My father said something else to Leo, then turned and walked back toward the party, leaving Leo with the two men. My smile faded. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I started walking toward them. One of the men put a hand on Leo's arm. Leo tried to pull away. "What is going on?" I called out. My voice was sharp, cutting through the happy noise of the reception. A few people turned to look. My father, who was halfway back to the patio, paused and turned around. He had a look of mild annoyance on his face, as if I were a child interrupting a grown-up conversation. Leo looked at me, his face pale with shock and confusion. He was holding the manila envelope as if it were something vile. "Clara, it is fine," my father said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Leo and I were just finishing up." But the two men were now firmly holding Leo's arms. They were escorting him toward a side gate, away from the party. "No," I said, walking faster. "Let him go. What are you doing?" I reached them and tried to grab Leo's hand. One of the men blocked me. "Ma'am, please step back," he said in a flat, professional voice. "Leo, what is in the envelope?" I asked, my eyes locked on his. He looked completely bewildered. "I do not understand," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It is a restraining order. He says I have to leave the property. He says I cannot come within 500 feet of you." My blood ran cold. I stared at him, then at my father, who was now watching us with a detached sort of interest. "What?" I breathed. "That is impossible. That is insane." "It is a legal document, Clara," my father said, walking over to us. "It is for your own protection." His voice was so reasonable, so calm. It was the voice he used when he was about to destroy a business rival. "Protection from what?" I demanded, my voice rising. "He is my husband. We just got married." My mother had now drifted over, her face a mask of worried confusion. "Richard, what is this all about?" she asked timidly. "Helen, please, I am handling it," he said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. He looked at me. "I have information. I have proof that this man is not who you think he is. I did this to protect you, to protect our family." The two men started pulling Leo toward the gate again. "No," I shouted. I tried to push past them, but they were like stone walls. "Leo, do not go," I pleaded. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain. "I have to," he said. "They said they will have me arrested if I do not comply." "This is our wedding night," I cried, turning back to my father. The guests were all staring now, their happy smiles replaced with looks of shock and curiosity. The music had faltered and stopped. "How could you do this? How could you do this to us?" My father's face hardened. The mask of the loving father slipped away, replaced by the cold, calculating businessman I knew all too well. "I will do whatever it takes to protect what is mine," he said. "And you, Clara, are mine." The men opened the side gate and pushed Leo out into the dark street beyond. They closed the gate with a heavy, final click. I was left standing there, in my wedding dress, staring at the closed gate. My husband was gone. My perfect night was shattered. And my father stood there, looking at me as if he had just solved a difficult problem. The manila envelope had fallen to the ground at my feet. I bent down and picked it up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I tore it open. Inside, there was a temporary restraining order signed by a judge. It was filled with lies. Horrible, ridiculous lies, accusing Leo of harassment, stalking, and threatening behavior. All of it sworn to under penalty of perjury. By my father. I looked up from the papers, my vision blurry with tears. My father was already walking back to the remaining guests, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "My apologies, everyone," he said, his voice booming with false sincerity. "A small family matter that has now been resolved. Please enjoy the rest of the evening." He was trying to pretend this was normal. He was trying to erase what he had just done. I felt a surge of cold, hard anger replace the shock and grief. He had not just ruined my wedding. He had declared war on my marriage, on my life, on me. He thought he had won. He thought he could control me just like he controlled everything else. He was wrong. This was not over. This was just the beginning. I turned and walked away from the party, away from my father's lies and my mother's weak protests. I walked through the house, my wedding dress trailing behind me like a ghost. I went to my old bedroom and closed the door. I pulled out my phone and dialed Leo's number. He answered on the first ring. "Clara?" His voice was shaky. "Leo, where are you?" I asked, my own voice tight with suppressed rage. I am in a taxi, he said. I do not know where to go. I cannot go back to our apartment. The order says I have to stay away from there too. Go to your friend Mark's place, I told him. Stay there. Do not talk to anyone, especially not my family. What is happening? He asked, his voice filled with a desperate confusion that broke my heart. Why would he do this? Because he is a monster, I said, the words tasting like poison. Because he cannot stand for me to be happy with anyone but him. He wants to own me. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to be calm, to think clearly. Listen to me, Leo. We are going to fight this. I am going to fix this. I promise. How? He asked. He is your father. He has all the money, all the power. I do not know how yet, I admitted. But I will find a way. He made a mistake. He underestimated me. He thinks I am just his little girl. He is about to find out who I really am. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I love you, Clara, he finally said. I love you too, I replied. More than anything, stay strong. I will call you tomorrow. I hung up the phone and sank onto the bed. The beautiful white dress felt like a costume. The joy of the day felt like a distant, impossible memory. The only thing that felt real was the cold, heavy weight of the restraining order in my lap and the burning fire of anger in my chest. My father had welcomed my husband to the family, and then he had tried to destroy him. He had tried to break us. He would not succeed. I would make sure of it. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had not slept at all. The wedding dress was crumpled on a chair, a sad reminder of a day that had started with so much promise and ended in disaster. I put on a pair of jeans and a simple t-shirt, feeling like I was putting on armor. I went downstairs. The house was quiet. The remnants of the party had been cleared away as if it had never happened. My father was sitting at the dining room table, reading the financial news and sipping his coffee. He looked up as I entered, and his expression was one of mild disappointment. Good morning, Clara, he said, as if nothing was wrong. I was hoping you would sleep in. You had a big day yesterday. I stood at the other end of the table, my arms crossed. We need to talk, I said. My voice was flat and cold. He sighed and put down his newspaper. I suppose we do, he said, but I do not have much to say. I did what was necessary. Necessary for what? I asked. To ruin my life? To humiliate my husband? To destroy the happiest day of my life? He looked at me with what he probably thought was paternal concern. I did it to protect you from a terrible mistake, he said. Leo is not the man you think he is. He is a predator. He is after our family's money. That is a lie, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Leo has never once asked me for a single penny. He has his own career, his own life. He loves me. Love. My father scoffed, the word sounding foreign and ridiculous in his mouth. You are young. You do not understand how the world works. Men like him, they are charming. They know what to say. They prey on naive young women with wealthy fathers. And what proof do you have? I challenged him. The restraining order is full of lies. You said you had proof. Show it to me. He leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face. I do not need to show you anything, he said. The proof was submitted to the court. It was compelling enough for a judge to sign the order. That is all that matters. So you will not even tell me what he supposedly did? I asked, my disbelief growing. You just expect me to accept this? To abandon my husband because you say so? Yes, he said simply. That is exactly what I expect. I am your father. I know what is best for you. My mother walked into the room then, carrying a tray with more coffee. She looked tired and nervous. She avoided my eyes. Richard, maybe you should explain things to her, she said softly. Clara is upset. She will get over it, my father said, waving his hand dismissively. In a few years, she will thank me for saving her from that fortune hunter. I turned to my mother. And you? I asked. Do you believe this? Do you think Leo is some kind of monster? She wrung her hands, her eyes darting between me and my father. I just think your father has his reasons, she stammered. He is very thorough. He would not do something like this without a good cause. She was his enabler. She always had been. She smoothed over his rough edges, made excuses for his cruelty, and taught me to do the same. I had spent my whole life trying to win his approval, trying to be the perfect daughter, all while she stood by and watched him control every aspect of my life. I see, I said, my voice dripping with a disappointment so profound it felt like a physical weight. So you are with him on this? She flinched. It is not about taking sides, dear, she said. It is about what is best for the family. What is best for him, you mean? I shot back. I turned my attention back to my father. This is not going to work, I said, my voice steady now. I am not a child anymore. You cannot order me to leave my husband. I am going to fight you. My father laughed. It was a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. Fight me? He said. With what? You have no money of your own. The apartment you live in is owned by my company. The car you drive is registered in my name. The credit card in your wallet is linked to my account. You have nothing, Clara. You are nothing without me. His words were meant to hurt, to make me feel small and powerless. And for a moment they did. A wave of fear washed over me. He was right. He had structured my life so that I was completely dependent on him. It was the ultimate form of control. But then, the fear was replaced by something else. A cold, clear resolve. He had left me with nothing, which meant I had nothing left to lose. You are wrong, I said quietly. I have Leo, and I have the truth. And I promise you, that is going to be more than enough. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him sitting there with a look of surprise on his face. He was not used to being defied. I went back to my room and packed a small bag. I took only the things that were truly mine. Some clothes I had bought with my own small salary from my part-time job, a few books, and a framed picture of me and Leo, taken on the day he proposed. We were both laughing, completely happy and unaware of the storm that was coming. As I was leaving, my mother caught me at the door. Clara, please, she begged, her eyes filled with tears. Do not do this. Do not throw your life away. Just listen to your father. I have listened to him my whole life, Mom, I said, my voice softer now. I felt a pang of pity for her. She was as much his prisoner as I was. Look where it has gotten me. I have to do this. For me. For Leo. Where will you go? She asked. I will figure it out, I said. I could not tell her I was going to a friend's house. I did not trust her not to tell my father. I gave her a quick, stiff hug and walked out the door without looking back. I did not have a car, so I called a ride-sharing service. As I waited on the curb, I looked back at the huge, imposing house I had grown up in. It had never felt less like a home. It was a cage, and I had just escaped. My first stop was to see a lawyer. I had used the last of the money in my personal bank account, the small one my father did not control, to pay for the consultation. Her name was Ms. Davis, and she was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s. I explained the whole story, from the beautiful toast to the horrific restraining order. I showed her the papers. She read through them carefully, her expression grim. This is bad, she said when she was finished. The allegations are serious, and they are very specific. She pointed to a line in the document. It claims Mr. Leo has been sending your father threatening emails. It lists dates and times. That is impossible, I said. Leo would never do that. He is the gentlest person I know. I believe you, Ms. Davis said, but a judge believed your father. These orders are usually granted on an ex parte basis, meaning only one side, your father's, was present to tell their story. The judge signs it to be safe, assuming there might be a real threat. We will have a chance to fight it in court, but we will need to prove that your father lied. How do we do that? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. It is his word against Leo's. We need evidence, she said. We need to find proof that these emails are fake. We need to find out what information your father claims to have. We need to build a case that shows a pattern of controlling behavior. She looked at me intently. This is going to be a difficult fight, Clara. Your father is a powerful man. He will have the best lawyers money can buy. It will be expensive. I do not have any money, I admitted, my cheeks flushing with shame. My father controls everything. Ms. Davis leaned forward. Let me be frank with you, she said. In cases like this, of what we call malicious use of process, if we can prove your father intentionally filed a false report to harass and control you, we can sue him for damages. We can make him pay for all of this. I am willing to take your case on contingency. That means I will not get paid unless we win. But you need to be sure about this. Once we start down this road, there is no turning back. You will be going to war with your own father. I thought of Leo, alone and scared, kicked out of his own wedding. I thought of my father's smug, triumphant face. I thought of the lifetime of control, of never being good enough, of always being his possession. I am sure, I said, my voice firm. Let us go to war. Ms. Davis smiled for the first time. It was a thin, sharp smile. Good, she said. Now, let's get to work. Tell me everything you know about your father. Every secret, every weakness, every person who might have a reason to dislike him. I took a deep breath and started to talk. I talked for hours, and for the first time since my wedding night, I felt a glimmer of hope. The first step was to get Leo a safe place to stay and to make sure he understood the legal situation. I met him at a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes. He jumped when the barista called out an order. Seeing him like this, so anxious and afraid, solidified my resolve. My father had done this to him. He had taken this kind, wonderful man and filled him with fear. How are you holding up? I asked, taking his hands across the table. They were cold. I feel like I am in a nightmare, he said. I keep replaying it in my head. The toast, his smile, and then that envelope. Did I do something? Did I offend him somehow and not realize it? No, I said firmly. You did nothing wrong, Leo. This is not about you. This is about him. It is about him controlling me. I explained everything that had happened since he had been forced to leave. My confrontation with my father, my mother's reaction, and my meeting with Ms. Davis. A lawyer? He asked, his eyes widening. Clara, can we afford that? Maybe we should just... I do not know. Maybe I should leave town for a while. Let him cool off. No, I said, squeezing his hands tighter. We are not running. We are not hiding. We are fighting. Ms. Davis is taking the case on contingency. We do not pay unless we win, and we are going to win. I told him about the plan. We needed to prove the emails my father had submitted to the court were fake. I have never sent your father a single email, Leo said, shaking his head. I would not even know his email address if he did not use the one for his company. That is what we have to prove, I said. Ms. Davis is going to file a motion to get copies of the evidence he submitted. She says we can have a forensic expert look at them to see if they were fabricated. This is all so crazy, he whispered. It feels like something out of a movie. I know, I said. But this is our life now. We just have to get through it. I gave him some cash that I had borrowed from a friend. Find a small furnished apartment to rent month to month, I told him. Use a different name if you have to. Stay off social media. Be a ghost. The less my father knows about where you are, the better. He nodded, looking a little stronger, a little more determined. What about you? He asked. Where are you staying? With my friend Sarah, I said. He does not know her well. I will be safe. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just holding hands. The world outside the coffee shop seemed to go on as normal, but our world had been turned upside down. I am so sorry, Clara, Leo said quietly. I am sorry for bringing all this trouble into your life. I looked at him, my heart aching. Do not you dare be sorry, I said. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. This is not your fault. It is his, and he is going to pay for it. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and quiet investigation. Ms. Davis filed the motions, and my father's high-priced legal team responded with delays and objections. It was clear they were going to try to drag this out, to wear us down, to bleed us dry emotionally and financially, even though they knew we had no money. It was a classic tactic of his. During this time, I started my own investigation. I began to think about what Ms. Davis had said. I needed to find people who had a reason to dislike my father. His list of enemies was long. I started with a long shot. My father had a personal assistant, a woman named Janice. She had worked for him for over 20 years. She was fiercely loyal, but she had always been kind to me. She had seen me grow up. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would have some sympathy for my situation. I waited for her outside her apartment building one evening after work. She looked startled to see me. Clara, she said, clutching her purse to her chest. What are you doing here? Your father said you were unwell. I am not unwell, Janice, I said. I am angry. You know what he did at my wedding. She looked away, her face troubled. I only know what I hear, she said evasively. It is not my place to get involved in family matters. He is lying, I said, my voice pleading. He is trying to destroy my marriage with lies. The emails he claims Leo sent him? They are fake. I know they are. You manage his correspondence. You would know if Leo had been sending him threatening messages. Janice looked around nervously, as if my father might materialize out of thin air. I cannot talk about this, she said, starting to walk past me. Please, Janice, I said, stepping in front of her. I am not asking you to testify against him. I just need to know. Am I crazy? Is there any chance Leo actually did this? She stopped and looked at me. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity? Guilt? Your father is a very complicated man, she said carefully. He sees the world in a certain way. He believes he is always acting in the best interests of his company and his family. That is not an answer, I pressed. She sighed, a deep, weary sound. No, she said, her voice barely a whisper. There were no emails from Leo. Not like the ones he described. My heart leaped. It was the first piece of confirmation I had. Thank you, I whispered. That is all I needed to know. Be careful, Clara, she said, her eyes full of warning. You do not know what he is capable of when he feels he is losing control. She hurried into her building and closed the door, leaving me alone on the sidewalk. I had my first piece of the puzzle. The emails were fake. Now I just had to prove it. The court granted our motion to get copies of the evidence. When Ms. Davis received the file, she called me into her office immediately. Spread out on her conference table were printouts of a dozen emails, all supposedly from a generic email account, all sent to my father's private email address. They were filled with crude, threatening language. They accused him of trying to control me, and they made vague threats about exposing his dirty business secrets if he did not back off. They look convincing, I said, feeling a chill despite the warmth of the office. The dates, the times, it all looks so real. It is meant to, Ms. Davis said. But look closer. She pointed to the header information on one of the emails. It was a long string of technical data. This is the routing information. It shows the path the email took to get to your father's inbox. I have sent these to a forensic expert. He is going to analyze them. If these were created by someone trying to frame Leo, they might have made a mistake. A week later, the expert's report came back. It was our first major breakthrough. The expert had found that all 12 emails originated from the same IP address. An IP address is a unique number that identifies a device on the internet, and the IP address in question was not linked to Leo's apartment, his workplace, or any public Wi-Fi he had ever used. It was traced back to a high-end hotel in the city's financial district, a hotel my father often used for discreet meetings. "This is good," Ms. Davis said, a triumphant gleam in her eye. "It does not prove your father sent them himself, but it proves they did not come from Leo. It connects the emails to a place your father frequents." "But who sent them?" I asked. "He would not have done it himself. He is too smart for that. He would have hired someone." "Exactly," she said. "And that is our next step. We need to find out who he hired." I thought back to my conversation with Janice. She had been nervous, but she had helped me. Maybe she knew more, but I could not risk contacting her again. My father would be watching her. I needed another way in. I started thinking about my father's business dealings. He was ruthless. He had pushed a lot of people out of his way to get to the top. Maybe one of them would be willing to help me. I spent days in the library, poring over old business articles about my father's company. I made a list of former partners, fired executives, and rival companies he had crushed. One name stood out: a man named Arthur Vance. He had been my father's partner when they first started the company. They had a bitter falling out years ago. My father had bought him out for a fraction of what his shares were worth, essentially forcing him into early retirement. The article said Vance had threatened to sue, but it never went anywhere. He had disappeared from the business world. I managed to track him down. He was living in a modest house 2 hours outside the city. I drove there on a Saturday, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. I found him in his garden, a stooped elderly man with kind eyes and hands caked with dirt. He looked surprised to see me. "You are Richard Thompson's daughter," he said, his voice raspy. I would recognize those eyes anywhere. "Yes," I said. "My name is Clara. I was hoping I could talk to you about my father." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Come inside," he said. "I will make some tea." I told him everything. He listened patiently, his expression growing more and more grim. When I was done, he shook his head slowly. "I'm not surprised," he said. "Richard was always a man who needed to control everything and everyone around him. He sees people as assets or liabilities. There is no in-between." "I need to stop him," I said. "I need to find a way to prove what he is doing." Arthur Vance looked out the window, a distant look in his eyes. "Richard has a man he uses for sensitive tasks," he said. "A private investigator, a former cop named Frank Miller. He is not a good man. He does whatever Richard pays him to do, no questions asked. If your father wanted to create fake emails or manufacture evidence, Frank would be the one he would call." He wrote the name down on a piece of paper and pushed it across the table to me. "I do not know if this will help you," he said. "Frank is loyal to the money, but it is a start." I felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you so much." "Be careful, young lady," he said, his kind eyes full of concern. "When you corner a man like your father, he does not run. He bites." I took the piece of paper and drove back to the city, the name Frank Miller burning in my mind. Arthur Vance had given me the next piece of the puzzle. I was getting closer. Ms. Davis was thrilled with the new information. "Frank Miller," she said, typing the name into her computer. "He has a reputation. He skirts the edge of the law. This is exactly the kind of man your father would hire." She hired our own investigator, a woman named Beth, to look into Frank Miller. Beth was methodical and discreet. She started by digging into his financials. It did not take her long to find something interesting. 2 days before your wedding, Miller received a wire transfer for $50,000. Beth reported to us a week later. The transfer came from a shell corporation, but I traced the ownership of that corporation. It is a subsidiary of your father's main company. My heart started beating faster. That is it, I said. That is the payment for the fake evidence. It is strong circumstantial evidence, Ms. Davis corrected me gently. But it is not definitive proof. A jury could be convinced that your father hired him for a legitimate reason. We need something more. We need to get Miller to talk. He will never talk, I said, feeling my hopes sink. Arthur Vance said he is loyal to the money. Everyone has a price, Beth said with a grim smile. And everyone has a weakness. Let me keep digging. I will find his. While Beth worked on Frank Miller, I had to deal with the escalating pressure from my father. He had cut off my credit card, as he had threatened. He had the car repossessed. He even called my part-time job at a local art gallery and told my boss that I was emotionally unstable and a liability. I was fired the next day. He was systematically stripping away every part of my life, trying to force me to come crawling back to him. The worst part was the social isolation. He had been calling our relatives, spreading his version of the story. He told them Leo was a dangerous manipulator and that I was having some kind of breakdown. Most of them, people I had known my whole life, believed him. My phone calls went unanswered. I was uninvited from a cousin's birthday party. It was a lonely, terrifying time. My only support was Leo, who I would meet in secret, and my friend Sarah, who let me sleep on her couch and never once complained. One evening I was feeling particularly low. My brother Mark called me. He was a few years younger than me, still in college and still very much under our father's thumb. "Clara?" he said, his voice hesitant. "Dad told me not to call you." "Then why are you?" I asked, my voice tired. "Because I saw Aunt Carol today," he said. "She said you were not well. She said Leo was hurting you. But that does not sound right. That does not sound like you." A small spark of hope ignited in me. "It is not right, Mark," I said. "It is all lies. Dad is trying to break up my marriage because he cannot control me anymore." There was a long silence on the line. "I know how he can be," Mark said finally, his voice quiet. "He tried to make me change my major last year, said art history was a waste of time. He threatened to stop paying my tuition." "What did you do?" I asked. "I changed my major," he said, and I could hear the shame in his voice. "I am not as strong as you, Clara." "This is not about being strong," I told him. "It is about being right. He is trying to ruin an innocent man's life. He filed a false police report, Mark. He perjured himself." "I know," he said. "I believe you. But what can I do? He controls everything." "I do not need you to do anything," I said. "I just needed to know that someone in our family still believes me." "I do," he said. "Be careful, Clara." The call was short, but it meant the world to me. It was a reminder that I was not completely alone. The truth had a way of seeping through the cracks of my father's lies. Beth's investigation into Frank Miller finally paid off. She found his weakness. Miller had a daughter who was in a very expensive, very exclusive private medical facility. She had a rare genetic disorder, and her treatment was costing him a fortune. A fortune he likely did not have without my father's regular payments. But Beth also found something else. Miller had a history of cutting corners. A few years back, he had been investigated for falsifying evidence in a high-profile divorce case. The case had been quietly settled, and the records were sealed, but Beth's contacts in the police department remembered it. "He is vulnerable," Beth explained. "If he gets caught for perjury in this case, he will lose his investigator's license. He might even face jail time. Without his license, he cannot earn the kind of money he needs to pay for his daughter's care. Your father is his golden goose, but he is also his biggest liability." "So how do we use this?" I asked. "We arrange a meeting," Ms. Davis said. "You and I will meet with him. We will present him with a choice." The meeting was set for a neutral location, a small, anonymous conference room in a downtown office building. Frank Miller walked in looking wary and annoyed. He was a big man, with a hard face and eyes that had seen too much. He looked at me with a flicker of recognition. "You are the daughter," he said. It was not a question. "And you are the man my father paid to ruin my life," I replied, my voice steady. He grunted and sat down opposite us. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said. "My business with your father is confidential. We are here to talk about the $50,000 wire transfer you received 2 days before my wedding," Ms. Davis said, sliding a copy of the bank record across the table. "And we are here to talk about the fabricated emails you created from an IP address at the Grand Hotel." Miller's face did not change, but I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. "Those are serious accusations," he said. "You cannot prove any of that." "We can," Ms. Davis said calmly. "We have a forensic report on the IP address, and we have a sworn statement from Arthur Vance about your long-standing relationship with my client's father. But we also have something else." She slid another file across the table. "We have the unsealed records from the Harrington divorce case, the one where you were investigated for falsifying evidence. It seems you have a pattern of this kind of behavior. Perjury is a felony, Mr. Miller. A conviction would mean the end of your career. It would mean no more money for your daughter's treatment." Miller stared at the file, then at Ms. Davis, then at me. For the first time, I saw a crack in his tough exterior. I saw fear in his eyes. He was trapped. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice a low growl. "I want the truth," I said. "I want a signed, notarized affidavit from you, detailing everything my father hired you to do. I want you to admit that you fabricated the emails. I want you to tell us what other evidence you created for him." "And if I do?" he asked. "He will destroy me." "If you do not," Ms. Davis said, "I will hand over this entire file to the district attorney's office. You will be prosecuted and you will lose everything. Your father will cut you loose. You know he will. He does not care about you. He only cares about winning." Miller was silent for a long time, his mind clearly racing. He was weighing his options. Loyalty to my father, who would abandon him in a second, or self-preservation. "If I give you the affidavit," he said slowly, "you have to guarantee me immunity. You have to promise not to use it to prosecute me." "We are not the district attorney," Ms. Davis said. "We cannot promise you that. But we can promise that our civil suit will be directed solely at Richard Thompson. We have no interest in you, as long as you cooperate. Fully and completely." He looked at me. "He did this to his own daughter," he said, shaking his head slightly. It was a strange moment of connection between us, a shared disbelief at my father's cruelty. "Yes," I said. "He did." He sighed, a long, ragged breath of defeat. "All right," he said. "Get your pen and paper. I will tell you everything." For the next 2 hours, Frank Miller laid out the entire conspiracy. My father had hired him a month before the wedding. His instructions were simple. Find something, anything, to get rid of Leo. Miller had conducted a thorough background check on Leo and found nothing. He was a normal, decent guy with a clean record and a good job. He reported this to my father. My father was furious. He had said, "If you cannot find anything, then you will create something." He had instructed Miller to create the fake emails. He had also paid Miller to hire actors to stage a confrontation with Leo outside his office building. They had provoked him, yelled at him, and tried to get him to throw a punch. Leo had just walked away. But Miller had a photographer taking pictures from a distance. The photos, taken out of context, made it look like Leo was the aggressor. These photos were also submitted to the court as evidence. Miller admitted to everything. He wrote it all down, every last sordid detail. He signed the affidavit, and we had it notarized on the spot. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. "Your father," he said. "He told me he was doing this to protect you." "He was doing it to control me," I corrected him. Miller nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds more like it." He walked out, and I was left staring at the signed confession in my hands. It was the weapon I needed. It was the proof that would not only win our case, but would also expose my father for the monster he truly was. The war was not over, but I had just won the most important battle. With Frank Miller's signed affidavit, the balance of power shifted completely. Ms. Davis immediately filed a motion for an emergency hearing to have the restraining order dismissed. She attached Miller's confession as an exhibit. The effect was instantaneous. My father's lawyers, a team from a prestigious and very expensive firm, were thrown into a panic. They filed for a delay, which the judge denied. The hearing was set for the following week. The day before the hearing, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was strained and high-pitched. "Clara, you have to stop this," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Your father he is not himself. He is furious. You are tearing this family apart." "He is the one who tore this family apart," I said, my voice cold. "He did it the moment he handed my husband a restraining order at our wedding reception." "He made a mistake," she pleaded. "He was just trying to protect you. He went too far. He sees that now." "Does he?" I asked. "Has he apologized? Has he offered to drop the restraining order? Has he done anything to undo the damage he has caused?" There was a silence on the other end of the line. "He wants to meet with you," she said finally. "He wants to talk. Just the two of you." "I have nothing to say to him," I said. "We will say everything that needs to be said in court tomorrow." "Please, Clara," she begged. And now she was openly crying. "He is your father. Do not do this to him. He could be disbarred. He could face criminal charges. You could ruin him." "He tried to ruin me," I said quietly. "He tried to ruin Leo. He thought he could do it without any consequences. He was wrong." I ended the call. I felt a pang of sadness for my mother. She was trapped in a world of his making, and she could not see a way out. But I could not let her guilt or her fear stop me. I had come too far. The next day in court was surreal. It was a small, formal room. I sat with Ms. Davis and Leo, who was allowed to be present for the hearing. My father sat at the opposing table with two of his lawyers. He would not look at me. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of cold fury. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Ms. Davis presented our case first. She laid out the facts simply and clearly. She described the events of the wedding night. She presented the forensic report on the emails. And then she submitted Frank Miller's affidavit. She read parts of it aloud. The judge's expression grew darker and darker with every word. He looked over at my father, a look of utter contempt on his face. When it was my father's lawyer's turn to speak, he could do little more than stammer. He tried to claim that Frank Miller was a disgruntled employee, that his confession was coerced. The judge cut him off. "Are you seriously suggesting," the judge said, his voice dangerously low, "that this entire, detailed, notarized confession is a lie? Are you prepared to put your client on the stand under oath to refute it?" My father's lawyer exchanged a panicked look with his partner. He leaned over and whispered something to my father. My father shook his head angrily. The lawyer whispered again, more urgently this time. Finally, my father slumped in his chair, defeated. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, his voice weak, "my client will not be testifying, and we will not be opposing the motion to dismiss the restraining order." The judge nodded. "Wise decision," he said. He then turned his full attention to my father. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice booming in the small courtroom. "I have been a judge for 30 years. In that time, I have seen a lot of things, but I can honestly say that I have never seen a more flagrant, more malicious, more despicable abuse of the court system. You used this court to perpetrate a fraud. You perjured yourself to harass and intimidate your own daughter and her husband. You are a disgrace to this community." My father sat there, his face pale, forced to listen to the judge's tirade. I saw his hands clench into fists on the table in front of him. "The temporary restraining order is hereby dissolved, effective immediately," the judge declared, "and I am referring this entire matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into perjury and malicious prosecution. I am also referring it to the State Bar Association. I would be surprised if you are still licensed to practice law by the end of the year." He banged his gavel. "We are adjourned." It was over. The legal threat was gone. Leo reached over and took my hand. His was warm now. He had tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. I just squeezed his hand. Too emotional to speak. We had won. We had exposed him. As we were leaving the courtroom, my father stood up. He looked directly at me for the first time that day. His eyes were full of a hatred so pure it was shocking. "You will regret this," he mouthed silently. I just stared back at him, unafraid. He had no power over me anymore. But I knew this was not the end. Winning in court was one thing, but my father's power was not just legal. It was financial. It was social. He would try to punish me in other ways. Ms. Davis had already filed the civil suit against him for damages, but that would take time. In the meantime, Leo and I had to rebuild our lives. We found a small apartment we could afford with Leo's salary and the last of my savings. It was a tiny place, nothing like the luxury apartment my father had provided for me, but it felt more like a home than that place ever had. It was ours. A few weeks later, I got a call from my brother, Mark. "I heard what happened in court," he said. "The whole family is talking about it. Dad is trying to spin it, saying the judge is biased, that you hired some con artist to frame him. But some people are not buying it. Uncle Robert called him and told him he was ashamed of him." "That is a start," I said. "Listen," Mark said, his voice dropping lower. "There is something else you should know. Dad is planning to sell the house, your childhood home." "What?" I asked, shocked. "Why?" "He is liquidating assets," Mark explained. "He is moving money around. He told Mom it is because the house has too many bad memories, but I heard him on the phone with his financial advisor. He is trying to protect his money from your lawsuit. He is setting up offshore accounts." A cold fury washed over me. Even now, after being exposed, after being disgraced, his only thought was to protect his money. He was not sorry. He was not remorseful. He was just trying to hide his assets. "There is something else," Mark said. "Before you got married, he made some changes to the family trust. The one Grandpa set up for us. I do not know the details, but he was bragging to Uncle Robert that he had future-proofed it. He said he had made sure he would always have the final say on where the money goes. This was the final piece of the puzzle. This was not just about controlling me. It was about controlling my inheritance. My grandfather had been a kind, generous man. He had left a significant amount of money in trust for me and Mark, to be given to us on our 30th birthdays. My father was the trustee. He had found a way to manipulate my grandfather's wishes. I called Ms. Davis immediately and told her what Mark had said. She was silent for a moment. "This is a new front in the war," she said. "He is not just fighting your civil suit. He is trying to disinherit you." She told me to get a copy of the original trust documents from my grandfather's estate lawyer, if I could. I remembered the lawyer's name. He was an old family friend. I called him, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet with me. The lawyer, a kind man named Mr. Albright, looked sad when I told him the story. "I was afraid of this," he said. "Your grandfather was a good man. He worried about Richard's tendencies. He put specific clauses in the trust to prevent Richard from having absolute control." He pulled out the original document. He showed me the clause. It stated that the trustee, my father, had to act in the best interests of the beneficiaries, me and Mark. It also had a no contest clause. If anyone challenged the trust in bad faith, they would be disinherited. But your father has filed a modification, Mr. Albright explained. He showed me a newer document, filed a month before my wedding. In it, my father had used his power as trustee to redefine what, in the best interests of the beneficiary, meant. He had added a clause that stated that any marriage entered into without the trustee's written approval would be considered detrimental to the beneficiary's interests. And he, as the trustee, had the sole power to withhold that approval for any reason. It was a loophole. A clever, diabolical loophole that would allow him to effectively disinherit me for marrying Leo. Can he do that? I asked, my blood running cold. It is legally questionable, Mr. Albright said. A judge might see it as a clear violation of the spirit of the trust, but it would be a long, expensive court battle to prove it. A battle he is counting on you not being able to afford. I felt a wave of despair. It was one thing after another. He had an answer for everything. He had planned this all along. But then I remembered something else. The no contest clause. He is the one challenging the trust, I said slowly, an idea forming in my mind. He is the one acting in bad faith. He is modifying it for his own selfish reasons, not for my benefit. Mr. Albright's eyes lit up. Yes, he said. Yes, that is a very interesting argument. If you could prove that he made this modification not to protect you, but to control you and punish you for marrying someone he did not like, then he would be the one in violation of the trust. And what happens if the trustee violates the trust? I asked. Mr. Albright smiled. According to the terms your grandfather set up, he said, if the trustee is found to be acting in bad faith, they are to be removed and replaced by the alternate trustee. Who is the alternate trustee? I asked, holding my breath. He looked at the document. It is your mother, Helen. I felt my heart sink. My mother would never stand up to him. She would just do whatever he said. But, Mr. Albright continued, if the alternate trustee is unable or unwilling to serve, or is deemed to be under the undue influence of the removed trustee, the decision then falls to the beneficiaries themselves. If you are of legal age, you can petition the court to become your own trustee. A new path opened up before me, a way to not just protect my inheritance, but to take it away from his control completely. It was a long shot. It would be an even bigger fight than the one we had just won. But it was possible. I left Mr. Albright's office with a copy of the trust documents and a new sense of purpose. My father had thought he was playing chess, moving his pieces around to trap me. But he had made a mistake. He had revealed his entire strategy. And now, I was going to use his own game against him. I was not just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my future, for my freedom, and for the legacy my grandfather had intended for me. The next phase of our legal battle began. We amended our civil suit against my father to include a challenge to his position as trustee of my grandfather's trust. We alleged that he had breached his fiduciary duty by modifying the trust for his own personal, coercive reasons, and not for my benefit. We petitioned the court to have him removed as trustee. My father's response was swift and brutal. His lawyers filed a countersuit, claiming that I was the one violating the no contest clause. They painted me as a greedy, ungrateful daughter, manipulated by her new husband into trying to steal the family fortune. They used my financial dependence on him as proof, twisting it to make it seem like I was biting the hand that fed me. The local society papers had a field day with the story. Thompson family feud escalates, one headline read. I was portrayed as a spoiled brat, and my father as the concerned patriarch trying to protect his legacy. It was a painful, humiliating experience. My father was using the media to fight his war, to poison public opinion against me. But this time, I was not alone. Leo was by my side, a constant source of strength and support. Ms. Davis was a brilliant and relentless advocate, and I had an unexpected ally. My brother Mark, who had been quiet for so long, finally decided he had had enough. He called me one night, his voice filled with a new, firm resolve. I am done being scared of him, he said. What he is doing to you is wrong. He is trying to steal your future, and he is twisting Grandpa's memory to do it. I want to help. How? I asked. I will testify, he said. I will tell the court about how he threatened to cut me off if I did not change my major. I will tell them how he has always used money to control us. I will submit a statement in support of your petition. I am a beneficiary of the trust, too. I have a right to say that I do not believe he is acting in my best interest either. It was an incredibly brave thing for him to do. He was still financially dependent on our father. By siding with me, he was risking everything. But he did it anyway. His sworn statement added significant weight to our case. It showed a clear pattern of my father using his financial power as a weapon against his own children. The legal battle dragged on for months. There were depositions, hearings, and endless paperwork. My father's lawyers tried every trick in the book to delay and obstruct, but Ms. Davis met them at every turn. We had the truth on our side. And we had Frank Miller's affidavit, which proved my father's willingness to lie and fabricate evidence to get what he wanted. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. It was not a jury trial. It would be decided by a probate judge who specialized in trusts and estates. The courtroom was tense. Mark sat with me and Leo, a united front against our father. My mother sat behind my father, looking small and lost. The trial lasted for 3 days. My father's lawyers argued that he was a prudent trustee, protecting the family assets from a reckless daughter and her predatory husband. They put financial experts on the stand who testified about the importance of preserving wealth. When it was our turn, Ms. Davis was masterful. She called Mark to the stand. He was nervous, but he spoke clearly and honestly about our father's controlling nature. Then she called me. I told my story, from the beginning. I talked about my love for Leo and my father's immediate and irrational disapproval. I described the horror of our wedding night. My voice did not waver. I looked at my father as I spoke. He stared back, his expression unreadable. The final piece of our case was my father himself. Ms. Davis called him to the stand as a hostile witness. His lawyers objected, but the judge allowed it. For nearly 2 hours, Ms. Davis questioned him. She was relentless. She asked him about the restraining order. He claimed he had been misled by a faulty investigator. She asked him about Frank Miller. He claimed Miller was a liar trying to extort him. Then she moved on to the trust. Mr. Thompson, she said, you modified your father's trust to include a clause about approving of your children's spouses. Is that correct? It was a prudent measure to protect the family assets, he said stiffly. Protect them from what? Ms. Davis asked. From unsuitable partners, from gold diggers. Like your daughter's husband? She pressed. A man who, according to your own private investigator's initial report, was a perfectly decent, hard-working individual with no red flags in his background? My father's jaw tightened. The initial report was incomplete, he snapped. So you had a second, more complete report created, is that right? Ms. Davis shot back. One that involved fabricated emails and staged photographs? The lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. My father was trapped. He refused to answer, citing his right against self-incrimination. But his silence was more damning than any confession. Ms. Davis had one final question. Mr. Thompson, is it not true that your sole motivation for modifying this trust was to ensure that you, and only you, would have the ultimate control over your daughter's life and her inheritance, in direct violation of your father's wishes? That is absurd, he spat. I love my daughter. Everything I have done for her. I looked at him then, and I felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. He might even believe the words he was saying. His ego was so large, his need for control so absolute, that he had convinced himself that his cruelty was a form of love. The judge delivered his ruling a week later. He found in our favor on every single point. He ruled that my father had breached his fiduciary duty in the most egregious way. He had acted in bad faith, using the trust not as a shield to protect his children, but as a sword to control them. He was to be removed as trustee, effective immediately. The judge then addressed the issue of the alternate trustee. He noted my mother's presence in the court and her clear emotional and financial dependence on my father. He ruled that she was not a suitable replacement, as she would be subject to my father's undue influence. And then came the final, stunning blow. The judge granted our petition. He ruled that since I was of legal age and had shown myself to be responsible and clear-headed throughout the proceedings, I would be appointed as the new trustee of my own trust. Control of my inheritance, my future, was now in my hands. The courtroom was silent for a moment, and then Leo wrapped his arms around me. Mark came and hugged us both. We had done it. We had won. The aftermath was profound. My father was ordered to pay all of our legal fees, as well as a significant sum in damages for the malicious prosecution. The state bar did, in fact, suspend his license to practice law. The district attorney's investigation was ongoing, and he was facing possible criminal charges. His reputation, the thing he valued above all else, was in tatters. He had lost his power, his prestige, and the control he so desperately craved. My relationship with my mother remained strained. She called me a few times, her conversations a strange mix of timid congratulations and pleas for me to be the bigger person and reconcile with my father. I finally had to tell her that I could not have a relationship with her as long as she continued to enable his behavior. It was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do, but it was necessary. I had to protect my own peace. My brother Mark and I grew closer than ever. With our father's influence gone, he switched his major back to art history. I used a small portion of my trust to help him set up his own life, independent of our parents. He was finally free to be himself. And Leo and I began our life together, truly. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. We had a second wedding ceremony, a simple one with just a few close friends, Mark and Ms. Davis. There were no grand toasts, no fancy displays of wealth. Just love and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that we had faced the worst and had come through it together. Stronger than ever. I never spoke to my father again. I heard through Mark that he had become a bitter, isolated man. Most of his old friends and business associates had distanced themselves from him after the scandal. He had lost the respect he had worked his whole life to build. He had tried to welcome my husband into the family with a restraining order, a declaration of his power. But in the end, all he had done was expose his own weakness. He had tried to trap me, but he had only succeeded in setting me free. He had wanted to control my life, but instead I had taken control of my own. And that was a victory sweeter than any inheritance.